So some Chiefs players just made a big statement in their opening preseason game against the Arizona Cardinals, and while yes, it's just one game, there's still plenty of exciting takeaways to process through. Some are good, meanwhile some are still a work in progress. Then there's a couple of injuries to talk about, with one of them sadly being season-ending. So let's get into all of that and more. But first, how about those? Alright, so the Chiefs played a football game last night. Yeah, they lost to the Cardinals in their first preseason game, but whoop-de-doo, it's a televised scrimmage and the final score matters not. The play on the field is what matters the most here, and while it is a small sample size with 2 more games still to go, after watching through the coach's film and rewatching the game a second time, there was a bunch of things to take away from this one. For starters, linebacker Jack Cochran forced a fumble on the opening kickoff and Chris Roland Wallace recovered. Later on, Roland Wallace also had a pick on an overthrow, so that's a fumble recovery and an interception for Roland Wallace, and based on the value both CRW and Cochran can bring on special teams as well as defense, it was stock up for both of them. Safety Jaden Hicks also had an interception of his own as Kyler Murray decided to throw it right to him on this play here. Honestly, good on Hicks for reading Kyler's eyes the entire way, even if Kyler made it very easy for him. Jaden Hicks did have a tough missed tackle on Arizona's 43-yard touchdown play here, but other than that, I thought Hicks played really well. He had some big hits, multiple solid tackles, and a pass defense on top of that. Another safety, however, wasn't so fortunate as Deion Bush tore his Achilles. He went down awkwardly with a non-contact injury, but you knew something was immediately wrong by the way they were looking at his leg. Mahomes even came out and took a knee, and Deion ended up getting carted off with a towel over his head. It was a pretty somber scene, with Andy Reid confirming after the game that he did indeed tear his Achilles, which means Deion Bush is out for the season. He's a guy that I thought would pretty easily wind up on the Chiefs practice squad like he was last year, so the safety depth took a bit of a hit last night for sure. One safety that some were concerned about is the veteran Mike Edwards. He only played 19 snaps. Again, a lot of these guys didn't play a ton. It's a limited sample size, but he did have a bad whiff on a missed tackle here, and then he took a bit of a rough angle on another play that ultimately ended up in a touchdown. It was the same play Jaden Hicks missed on as well, but I will say Edwards did have a better play here near the end of the second quarter and also had a pretty solid pass breakup in the back of the end zone, so it wasn't all bad for Edwards, just a bit up and down. Then cornerback Jalen Watson took a hit while trying to make a tackle and was slow to get up. The eye in the sky then said, hey, get this man off the field and into the medical tent for evaluation, and he ended up being placed in concussion protocol. So both Deion Bush and Jalen Watson were the only two that didn't finish the game, with Bush's injury obviously being the most devastating. Other than that, linebackers Cam Jones as well as Jeffrey Bossa were both shaken up at one point in the game, but both returned. And speaking of Jeffrey Bossa, he had a couple of awesome plays in this game. I'm very encouraged by what I've seen from him. He led the room in tackles with 6 by night's end, but look at this play here. This is an absolute incredible play by Bossa and quite possibly one of my favorites on the night from any defender all game long. He perfectly timed the snap and blew that run play all the way up. And the play he got banged up on, by the way, was this one here, because he got the wind knocked out of himself. That's what I think happened, because he perfectly timed the snap on a blitz and lit Jacoby Brissett up. Felix Anudike-Uzomah also had a big hit on Brissett, but was later flagged for roughing the passer. On defense, it was Josh Williams who had a pretty nice pass breakup on this play here. Right place, right time, like that. But it was both Josh Williams and FAU that were the 2 main standout notable players on the field in the fourth quarter. Kind of shows you where they are at in the coach's eyes from a depth chart perspective. I don't love to see that for FAU being out there in the fourth quarter after just being drafted in the first round, but it is what it is at this point. A lot of fans are also piling on Nazeeh Johnson as he had a couple of penalties. One of them was a pass interference down the right sideline, and then on that same drive near the goal line, Nazeeh bit on the outside move here as Brissett threw a absolutely incredible ball for the touchdown. Maybe Nazeeh's stock is a bit down, but he made some plays too. He had a perfectly timed pass breakup, a great downfield tackle, and then caused a fumble on special teams, even though the Cardinals recovered. Some fans hate the guy, but I still have him making the 53-man roster as a depth piece in the cornerback room and a core special teamer. Maybe Noel Williams will take the next step up that the coaching staff is hoping for. He looked pretty good out there at times. You can tell he's still working through the growing pains. Wasn't perfect, but had a nice PBU in the back of the end zone. And on this punt return here, Noel Williams absolutely obliterated the Cardinals returner. It was helped in part by the fact that Matt Araiza might have the best leg in the league of any punter, but I loved seeing that for Noel. But again, he's a guy that could work his way up the totem pole on defense, even though he will be used a lot on special teams, and I hope to see more from him like that. I have more defensive and special teams takeaways to talk through, but first, let's flip sides to the offensive side of the ball here. That fumble forced by Jack Cochran on the opening kickoff set up KC's offense with incredible field position on their opening possession. So that's Mahomes, Kelsey, all the starters were out there for the most part. No Rice, no Hollywood as they're nursing injuries, but at the 13-yard line is where they started on this opening drive. Well, the first thing I noticed here was Isaiah Pacheco's burst looks all the way back as he exploded up the field for a very quick 8-yard gain. And for what it's worth, Kareem Hunt also looked noticeably quicker on the next series as he got a couple of carries himself. Basically, I liked what I saw out of both of these guys, but after that Pacheco run on their opening drive, Mahomes then targeted Tyquan Thornton left side, who drew a very obvious PI penalty to move them to the 1-yard line. In the very next play, Mahomes saw Jason Brownlee one-on-one on the right side and gave him a back shoulder ball that he fully extended and hauled in for the very impressive touchdown. So while I was really impressed with that catch from him, I wasn't extremely surprised. I think the wide receiver room is going to be a tough one to crack for Brownlee, even with Rice most likely starting the season suspended, but he did not hurt his chances with that catch, that's for sure. Later on in the game, Bailey Zappi threw one Brownlee's way, and he made what appeared to be a nice sliding grab for a catch. The ruling on the field, though, was an incompletion, and Andy Reid challenged that ruling, but sadly, somehow, some way, there wasn't enough evidence to overturn it. Kind of crazy. Now, another receiver in Tyquan Thornton made the most of his limited opportunities in this one as well. He was targeted by Mahomes early, like I just talked about, yes, but he also caught this 15-yard pass here from Gardner Minshew, showing great patience and timing in his route. But then, and maybe more importantly, was this incomplete pass that was thrown his way. It was a deep ball from Bailey Zappi, but Thornton clearly won this route and was just barely overthrown for what could have maybe been a deep ball touchdown. That's what KC needs from this guy in part, to show defenses they have multiple deep threats and to win like that. Thornton is currently making the roster right now if I had to put money on it. Another receiver that had a standout play was Elijah Badger in the second half. He caught a bubble screen on 3rd and 18 and not only patiently followed his blockers, but had a great juke to the left and spun his way around for the first down. I couldn't believe it. That was impressive as hell, and he's still a guy I'm hoping KC can sneak onto the practice squad this year. Next up, tight end Robert Tonyan ended up leading all pass catchers by the evening's end, catching 3 passes for 49 yards, and he looked solid out there. He's definitely putting together a strong case to make the 53-man roster, and if the coaching staff opts for 4 tight ends, I think he's on there. Jared Wiley had a pretty good play down the right sideline last night, but it was called back due to a penalty, and even with that, Robert Tonyan was getting looks out there for the most part prior to Wiley. Penalties were a theme of the night as KC got flagged 11 times for 113 yards, over double the flags and yards as the Cardinals, which is pretty crazy considering the Chiefs are always bailed out by the refs. Some of the calls were legit, undisciplined, you've got to work on it, yes, but some of them made me think that the refs actually had cataracts. And before I talk about the offensive line, the Chiefs quarterback play after Patrick Mahomes was a bit interesting, to say the least. Gardner Minshew was a bit up and down. He fumbled a snap, but showed good mobility on a couple different plays, including a scramble for a short touchdown run. He made that nice throw to Tyquan Thornton early on, but one of his most impressive plays was on 3rd down. He did a really good job hanging in there with pressure bearing down on him as he found Jalen Royals for the first down. Jalen ended the night with 3 catches for 14 yards, with one of them being a bubble screen that was bound to go absolutely nowhere no matter who caught the ball. Bailey Zappi had some great moments, but then threw 2, almost 3 interceptions, and it was almost a Jameis Winston-like experience with Zappi. Highest of highs, that was awesome, and then lowest of lows, good God, what was that? I honestly think Chris Oladokun should get more playing time next week, as he might have impressed me even more than Zappi. Chris O had a ridiculous play here where he initially fumbled the snap, but ran around like a lunatic, scrambling left and found wide receiver Hal Presley for what appeared to be a really insane 3rd down conversion. Well, Hal's heel barely touched the sideline after review, and it was ruled incomplete. But still, more playing time next week for Chris Oladokun. Please and thank you. Then, this is kind of crazy, but Sky Moore was the only receiver that was targeted to have 0 catches, and he ended preseason game number 1 with 0 receiving yards. He did, however, return a punt for 6 yards and a kickoff for 27 yards, but the most impressive return of anybody all night by far was Nico Remigio as he weaved his way up through traffic for nearly 50 yards. Right now, Nico is still locked in as the returner on the roster for me until proven otherwise, and nobody's been able to usurp him yet. Speaking of special teams, though, Harrison Butker made a 58-yard field goal with ease, and then Matt Ariza had 5 punts and averaged 57 yards per attempt with a long of 68, 1 yard shy of me being able to say nice. He also landed 2 inside the 20, with 1 bouncing inside the 5, and that's what I'm hoping more of from Matt Ariza this season. And then something else everyone had their eyes on was the offensive line. And even though Mahomes, Kelsey, and Pacheco only played a few snaps, they never returned after that opening touchdown. The offensive line did stay out there for another series, though Jawan Taylor came out and Jalen Moore came in to play right tackle. Moore looked like he needs a little bit more time to build up his confidence in a new system, but most of the eyes were on the other side of the line anyway. It's a pretty small sample size as both Kingsley Suamataia and Josh Simmons only played 10 snaps, but Josh Simmons looked freaking awesome out there. He went up against Baron Browning, a solid pass rusher in his own right, multiple times, and he was basically a non-factor. Simmons continues to look the part, and honestly, Kingsley didn't do too bad himself. He had 1 bad loss, which is what people really focused in on, and I get it. In the eyes of some, Kingsley's on a short leash based on how he performed early on last season, but he did a good job of moving from the initial block to take care of the blitzer. But yeah, he lost that rep. It was made to look even worse than it really was, though, because he tripped on Creed's feet. But other than that 1 loss, his 9 other snaps looked pretty decent to me. There's absolutely no need to hit the panic button here after this 1 game. He needs refinement, sure, but he's never played the position, and that should come with time. We always knew it was going to be a process to go from Joe Thuney, who was arguably top 3 at his position, to Kingsley, who's never really played guard ever before. Still, though, I was happy for the most part with how the offensive line looked out there in this game. That's at least with the first team. The 2s, we'll see. The 3s, yeah, it gets rough the longer you get into these games, especially in the 3rd and the 4th quarter. Now, I do have some takeaways from the running back room as well, but I was also encouraged by the effort I saw from defensive end Janarius Robinson on this play here, chasing the man down like a hyena and ending up with the only sack on the night. A very impressive rep here for a guy trying to make a case to get more opportunities early on in these preseason games. Then the rookie defensive end Ashton Gelati, he showed great hustle, energy on a bunch of plays, seemed undisciplined at time and remaining where he was supposed to be. But all in all, I did like the effort from him, and he finished the night with 4 tackles. Omar Norman Lott, though, he was a guy I was really hoping would stand out at least a couple times in this game, especially considering he was the Chiefs' 2nd-round pick with what looked like to be the easiest path to playing time. I think he's a guy I'm a bit underwhelmed by in this game. He had 29 snaps, and I didn't really see a play where I was like, oh shoot, there's Omar Norman Lott. It's still a small sample size, 29 snaps, but it looks like the Chiefs had him put on weight to be a bit more stout against the run, and that maybe also combined with his ankle not being 100%. He tweaked it early on during training camp. It seems like the weight being added and maybe the ankle took away from his quick initial first step. So, next week, I really hope to see some flashes from him because Chris Jones really needs some help along the interior of the D-line. Felix Anudike-Uzomah, believe it or not, he led the entire defensive line in pressures with 3 and was actually the only guy credited with more than 1. So all in all, more pressure, more sacks from the defensive line this Friday, please and thank you. And then the running back room was more difficult to judge outside of Pacheco and Kareem Hunt. Elijah Mitchell worked in a couple snaps prior to Steele, but it really was Steele who got the majority of the work after Kareem Hunt left, and then Elijah Mitchell came out after Steele was basically done. We also didn't even see Brashard Smith until the second half, and at that point in the game, you had all the backups in, and it's tough to get serious takeaways from that. I think you could look at some positives from every single person in the room, and I need the next 2 games to really be able to make a more decisive evaluation of the running back room. But hey, what are your biggest takeaways from this game based on what you have observed? I know it's tough based on the limited looks, and we really can't have any extreme opinions after just 1 game, especially if some of these guys only played 10 or less snaps. All in all, I'm still pleased with what I saw for the most part from several players, and it's just going to take more time. But hey, I would love to know your thoughts in the comments down below. Who are your biggest risers? Who are you struggling with right now at this point in time? Let me know, and until next time, let's go. Let's freaking go. How about those?